Reverse grids in Formula One? It's more likely than you think. Kia ora, I'm Kimmy. I talk about F1 in the world's second worst accent, and I hate this. Back during the Hungarian Grand Prix, Formula One CEO Stefano Domenicali did an interview with The Race where he talked about some tweaks he's intending to present to drivers and teams for the future of sprint races. Top of the agenda was more sprints and also a potential reverse grid format. Now, as you probably know, sprints are a bit of a point of contention among F1 fans. Some love them, some absolutely despise them. There's a few kind of sitting in the middle, and everyone's kind of got their own ideas on how they can be improved. But one of the things that always keeps getting chucked around is the concept of bringing in the reverse grid to the top tier of Formula racing. Now, I'll admit I actually quite like sprints. I wouldn't want one every weekend, but I wouldn't be averse to, say, 10 a year, and I understand why they exist, particularly from an event organizer standpoint. More competitive sessions means more people attending on traditionally quieter days, thus more people purchasing full weekend passes, more merchandise, more food and beverage sales, more money, basically. And sports run on money. F1 teams run on money. F1 teams get a cut of the money generated from all the various revenue streams Formula One management has. Broadcasting and media rights, sponsorships, hospitality packages, merchandise, social media advertising. It's a long list, but in the second to top spot, right behind media rights, is race promotion fees. In 2024, race promotion made up 29.3% of FOM's revenue. Sponsorships were another 18.6%, which is also pretty relevant because more viewership means more sponsors willing to pay a premium for a space on the hoardings. When you overlap race promotion fees with sprints, it's easy to see why Domenicali would want to push more sprints and more exciting racing in those sprints if that means making more money from a race weekend, whether that be people attending in person or by watching on screen. Because on screen is also pretty significant when you really think about it. How many hardcore fans do you know who watch every single session every single Grand Prix weekend? Now, I'll admit I do, but I also know a lot who don't. When you're faced with going out for some drinks with colleagues or hanging out with your family and friends or going to work if you're part of the pretty big portion of the world who has to do that kind of whole earning money to stay alive thing on the weekends versus watching 20 drivers do what effectively equates to 3 short testing programs, most people are going to choose the human connection and the getting paid bit. Personally, I have a tiny family, no children. All my friends are busy taking their own kids to weekend activities, and I only have to work until 1 PM on a Saturday, so I don't often have to make that choice. But when I do, there's always highlights or just reading the as it happened on F1.com. If even the diehards aren't always watching free practice, then it's probably safe to say that the average fan also isn't. But on a sprint weekend, that all changes. You now have 4 competitive sessions rather than 2, and it's across all 3 days. Instead of watching the highlights of Friday and Saturday morning or just reading the results or not really caring at all, suddenly you have a reason to be more inclined to watch that full broadcast on replay, or choose to watch it live if you have to pick between, say, a stressful lunch with your parents who always ask how work's going in that way that says, you could have amounted to so much more. Yes, I know, Mum, I could have been an engineer or an architect or a physicist or that kind of artist who can actually afford to survive. But I'm not. I rearrange carpet and tiles and punch numbers into spreadsheets 16 hours a week and then try really hard to make money by being not very funny on the internet. And that's fine, actually. Wait. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the choice between that family thing you kind of don't really want to do very much or watching 20 cars line up on the grid for the first of 2 heart-pounding starts of the weekend, then you're probably more likely to pick the cars this time around, or at least watch the replay in full. So more eyes on screen, more ratings, more reason to bump up sponsorship pricing, more people choosing to take Friday off work to attend a full Grand Prix weekend, sell out all 3 days, sell more $18 burgers and $15 Heinekens. And if you make the sprint itself less of a preview for the first third of Sunday, there may be even more opportunity. Identify the venues that have the ability to increase capacity, give them a sprint, make it as exciting as possible to make sure everyone wants to be there. So why not do a reverse grid? That's going to mean more overtaking, right? See, the thing about reverse grids in F2 and F3 is that they serve a very important purpose to drivers coming up the ranks, because even though they're in a spec series and in theory every car is the same, there's always certain teams that put things together better. More money means the ability to hire better talent. That's why some teams like Prema are generally considered more prestigious. And if you think all that is just bollocks, then just ask George Russell how he felt about being beaten by Lance Stroll in F3. So if you have a top talent with a lot of backing and a team with more resources who's already running a tight ship, then you have a recipe for someone to dominate a season without ever really learning how to defend or overtake with any kind of consistency. Enter reverse grids. That driver who qualified first and will start the feature race on pole suddenly finds themselves in the thick of it, having to fight through the field rather than just get a good start off the line and defend into the first few corners. This is an opportunity for those who would otherwise drive off into the distance to hone their racecraft, and a chance for those who are more consistently in the midfield to learn to defend against someone they know has an advantage over them. In contrast, by the time drivers have got to F1, they've done their time with this format. They shouldn't need to practice the racecraft side of things so much anymore, and making them do it while driving significantly larger cars with more downforce, throwing out more dirty air around tracks that haven't been designed with that in mind, thus making them pretty difficult to pass on, I think will become more of a frustration than an opportunity for points. And besides, if this is all about revenue, which based on Domenicali's comments it is, then what are you going to do about qualifying? Go back to just having the one session and then not really any competitive running on a Friday, thus negating the potential for higher attendance for a third of the weekend? Because if you continue to have separate sprint qualifying, then rather than SQ3 being a challenge to go the fastest, it's going to be a challenge to be the best at managing a delta and trying to deliberately end up in P10. A race to the bottom, basically, which to be fair would be a tough challenge, but how are you going to stop drivers just cruising around like they're barely pushing beyond an outlap, saving an extra set of softs for Grand Prix quali and going out on a 10-lap old set from FP1, or bottling it entirely and going over track limits on their one lap that counts? Perhaps the solution to that is one-shot qualifying for sprints, which is something I actually think would be a fun thing to try out. For at least a season, anyway. You have to go fast enough to make it into the top 10, but then it becomes a challenge of trying to fit into a specific gap. It's still kind of dumb, but it hopefully removes the deliberate manipulation element. Or maybe there's just one qualifying session for the entire weekend, but it moves to Friday. Then there's an FP2 on Saturday morning before the sprint, which is also kind of dumb because most people work on a Friday, and watching GP qualifying is a thing that fans actually really quite like to kind of do live. So the idea of a reverse grid for sprints throws up a whole lot more challenges and questions than just, will there be more overtaking, and is it too contrived for a championship where tens of millions of dollars of prize money can sometimes be decided by a few points? I think you probably know where I sit on this idea based on the fact that I said I hated it right at the very start, but the more I think about it, the less sense the whole thing makes. And one of the big issues with sprints is that where they are isn't so much decided by whether or not the track is going to offer good racing. This is why this whole reverse grid thing is kind of being discussed in the first place, because circuits are competing to host these events. They know they mean more ticket sales, more chance to sell other stuff that makes money like food and drink and hospitality packages and merch and everything else that you drop cash on when you attend a Grand Prix. But what this also means is that the circuits with more cash to splash are the ones that are winning the rights to the sprints. This is probably why we get tracks like Miami and China and Qatar hosting, not because they're the best tracks for the format, but because the promoters are desperate to sell out the weekend to justify capacity increases and they're willing to pay. So even though I personally am not against more sprints, I do find them quite fun weekends, if a little bit annoying, because it means even more spoiler dodging when I have to do an entire shift at work before I get the chance to watch. I do think the only way expanding the calendar makes sense is to put a focus on selecting tracks carefully based on their ability to promote good racing, and not just straightforward overtakes from tyre offsets, because that's not a thing in sprints 99% of the time, and well, DRS isn't a thing next year, so let's just call it not from opening up the aero on the straights, but also how often do we see a big name go out in Q1 and have to fight their way through the field because the track lends itself to forcing mistakes, or how often do we see drivers going wheel to wheel into the first corner and someone other than pole coming out at the front? Or if it rains, Will it be raceable? I don't want to see more sprint weekends if it's just going to be a nailed-on procession for 100Ks where the excitement stops the moment the guy on pole finds the clutch bite point. And the supposed leaked calendar for next year isn't really making it look like that's going to happen. Back in July, the official Dutch GP Twitter account posted an image that appeared to reveal the 6 sprints for 2026: Shanghai, Miami, Montreal, Silverstone, Zandvoort, and Singapore. Now 2, or you could probably even argue 3 or 4 of these tracks are notoriously challenging to pass on and are pretty much guaranteeing no changes to the starting order barring unexpected incidents or retirements. And look, I love Singapore. It's an incredible venue and an incredible city and an incredible event with all the concerts and acts happening all day and half the night, but it doesn't exactly lend itself to the most interesting races. I can, however, see why Singapore would push for a sprint, because at the moment it's entirely possible to pick up a one-day pass, even for Sunday, when the allocation of the 3-day passes has been exhausted. I was actually sitting next to a couple who bought Sunday GA tickets a week or 2 before last year's race. And even with the Porsches and F1 Academy on track and the fan zone and all the concerts going on all the time, Friday was pretty dead. Singapore already does a smart thing with its zoning for those who already are only really attending for the gigs, but it appears now they may be going one step further to try and get the most attendance possible over all zones over all days. And when it's $17 for a 500ml cup of Heineken, I can see why. So it is all about money, but then sport is entertainment, and entertainment at this kind of level exists as a money-making machine anyway. So I'm not begrudging FOM or the promoters or the local governments that. I get it. This is a crazy expensive motorsport owned by a media organisation with investors to be held accountable to, but expanding a calendar just for the sake of it and not having some care when selecting circuits, or something I haven't even discussed, which is the actual physical toll this takes on the people who travel with this circus for 9 or 10 months out of the year, is short-sighted. And to be honest, while writing this script, I kind of convinced myself that no, we shouldn't have more sprints actually, because the capitalist requirement for year-on-year growth can't go on forever. There comes a point where critical mass is reached, and I think with F1, we're actually already getting pretty close to it. Just wait, with the reported $500 million F1 is banking from the movie, it's probably a matter of time before we get a full-on F1 FU. Fictional universe, not, Q. 2 movies and a couple of limited series every year, every summer break hearing F1's watered-down version of Succession, books about background characters having office romances written entirely by ChatGPT. You get the picture. At some point, someone has to say, no, or we're going to end up like those of us who were once upon a time rabid Star Wars and Marvel Comics fans. Oversaturation and a dilution of the thing it once was, meaning we end up coming full circle as people just slowly stop giving a shit. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more of my stuff. Thank you so much to my patrons here on the screen. This month you have paid for about 3 days of my power bill, or 1.5 12-packs of decent beer, and for that I am incredibly grateful. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, then the link is down in the description as well as right here on the screen. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Hey guys, Editing Kimmy here. I just wanted to also mention, which I totally forgot to, that today is actually my channel's 2nd birthday, and we did actually obviously reach my goal of getting to 1,000 subscribers by today. I am just so grateful to everyone who's been supporting me over the last couple of years, anyone who's ever said something nice in the comments, those of you who are down there in the comments regularly and forming kind of a little community down there. This is just really cool to see, and I just wanted to say thanks, and hopefully I'll be here for another 2 years. So yeah, thanks. Bye.